My name is Rachel. I've been married to my husband, John, for actually 10 years this week. We have two boys. They're ages 7 and 9. We seem like we have it together on the outside, and John and I both do like excellent jobs of keeping it together and making it look like it's not that bad. Clearly, because he's still in, he still leaves and goes to work. His injuries are not visible. So when our youngest was started his first year of kindergarten, that's actually the year that John deployed. So that was the first deployment that we had to kind of endure as a family with kids. Our oldest son, when he started kindergarten, he had a lot of separation anxiety. And after like the first couple weeks, like it was pretty bad. I was picking him up and he was in tears. His teacher would tell me he wasn't really doing much throughout the day. He was crying. There was a lot of just internal struggle for him. He had his dad that just left, and so I think he was worried about if I was coming to pick him up as well. She actually used to tell me at the same time every day. He would just get really, really upset. And so there's something about that part of the day really that just triggered him. I think he was kind of like, okay, my mom should be here now and she hasn't come. I see John just like in that picture where we were leaving the pumpkin patch with the kids actually that day. I took that, and that was actually kind of like a rare occasion because he doesn't come out and do like a whole lot with me and the kids. And so he's carrying this one giant pumpkin on his shoulder, and just from the back it just struck me, and I'm like, that is exactly how I see him every single day. He carries so much and he doesn't let anybody in, and it's visible to me, but it's not visible to the rest of the world because they just aren't really able to see his internal struggle. He carries a lot of it alone, like I said before. He's very isolative. He keeps things to himself. Communicating and opening up is very hard for him. And watching him carry it all alone too, I think not only does it show that he's like lonely in it, it like makes me feel more lonely because we're going through the same thing essentially, but yet we're not going through it together. We're still kind of at the stage where he doesn't let a lot of people in and he likes to deal with things on his own. Sometimes I wish he would open up and he would tell me things and just tell me that he's struggling so that I could be present or maybe back off a little bit and give him space, or that I could just even know what's going on in his head. When a soldier deploys, everybody rallies around the family, and then they kind of disappear in the middle, and then when he comes home, everybody rallies around again. Everybody loves a good homecoming video, and they think it ends there, but it really doesn't. The deployment was really the most difficult, or the easiest part, and the most difficult part really comes after. When John came home, I called Military One Source, and I called them, and I had asked to see a counselor, and I found out that they kind of would cover a certain amount of sessions, so I started seeing a counselor, and I saw her consistently for I would say about 3 years, and I just recently stopped because it got to a point in our sessions, and she was wonderful. She actually had a lot of experience with the military, specifically PTSD and TBI, and she saw a lot of those individuals, and so she had a lot of background and kind of could be on both sides of the fence for me and help me to kind of understand what was going on in John's head at times. So there would be a lot of times I'd go in and I would say, well, this happened, and she'd help me kind of understand, well, this could have triggered him, and then also understand that I had triggers, and there's certain things that trigger me. I saw her for a good 3 years, but it got to the point where now it was almost like she's like, I can only help you so much without him getting help because you can't do the work for him. I used to say, this was years ago, I used to say to John, I really think you need to talk to somebody. I think something's going on. And for a while I got the response, there's nothing going on, I'm fine, I don't need to talk to anybody. Eventually, I think it started to disrupt his thinking, his thoughts. It started coming back up into his mind every day. The trauma just started to reappear. When it got bad enough and he was ready, he actually pursued the help from the VA, and he filed a claim with the VA. And then a few months later, after they actually had diagnosed him with PTSD, he got deployed. So he came back from deployment and kind of now, after reliving, the trauma again, he started to seek treatment with the VA, and it was really scattered. The only thing that was consistent was the medication, that they would just keep shelling out medications, giving him new ones, upping the dosage, switching them. As everything you try kind of fails and it doesn't work, he just has become more and more isolated. It's very common for the soldiers to want to go back overseas because they're kind of constantly at war in their head, and so that's where they feel the most at home. And so John would actually, I think, really like to deploy again, but of course, me and the kids feel differently. I would say it's kind of like we're all collateral damage, really, of kind of the deployment now and all the post-traumatic stress. And so the kids have to kind of endure, and sometimes I wonder if they're not trying to figure out, like, why is Daddy kind of isolated, or why is he, short today, or why is he gone all the time? And they've started to verbalize that actually here more recently. Some people don't understand or don't realize that the kids really are just as much a part of the diagnosis and the trauma. They live in the shadow of all this. There's a lot that goes on that they don't quite understand, and they kind of have to try and make sense of it. And sometimes, like, our oldest knows that he's been to war, and they understand that Daddy's, had to shoot people before, and John will talk here and there about it with the kids, but they don't quite understand, the effects that it's had on him and how Dad actually used to be different. This is really the only Dad that they know. Maybe as they get older, I would like them to understand, a little bit more why he is the way that he is, and just not take it so personal, because a lot of the times that's how it can feel. Like, if he's just having a bad day and he's short, the kids kind of can internalize that. So as they get older, I'd like them to understand there's reasons that he's that way. I have a son in school, and we are not near a military base, and we're not surrounded by any type of, any other military families. So for me to come into the school and tell them this is what's going on, I don't think anybody really took what I had to say seriously. We tried putting him back into the public school because that was the only place he had completed a whole year. And when we went back there, there's, some issues that arose again, and actually the vice principal was talking to a friend of mine who knew us, and she had said that, kind of sarcastically, "Oh, we know all about him, we dealt with him in kindergarten." And when we heard that, and John came home and he heard that, thankfully he was here and he could deal with it this time. And so he had to go up to the school and just remind them again, he is this way because I was gone, and I was over there because I was protecting you and your family. And he had to go around the room and just remind everybody else why he did what he did, and that they just really needed to give some grace to our son. I wish the VA, when they diagnose these soldiers, and they know the soldier has PTSD, and specifically the TBI, why does no one reach out to the family? Because essentially, we're all affected. The percentages of marriages that end up falling apart after somebody is diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury is very high. And so if you see the statistics and you know what happens, why does nobody reach out to, like, the caregiver? Why does nobody reach out and say, hey, this is going to be a long road, it's going to be hard, So there's a butterfly that was floating in the pool outside, and its wing was broken. And I picked it up out of the pool, and I showed my oldest, and he was holding it in his hand. And I decided to take a picture of it because it's just the perfect depiction. I mean, it was broken, it was trying to fly. There was, its wings were tattered, there was holes, there was one wing that was actually bent, and it just couldn't. But I thought it's still so beautiful, even like in its brokenness. That was just the perfect depiction of our story. It's being molded into something, that I just believe will be a really beautiful outcome in the end. But yet it's still seen, some trauma, and it's been battered, and our wings are definitely tattered, and we're not flying right now. But I believe we will. Again, I do believe that there's going to be healing, like for John in our family, and I believe that will feel like the wholeness again, and eventually just take off in flight.